Chapter 5, Surprise Encounters. A bit of an explanation may be useful here. Those of you whose memory, like mine, is as full of holes as a garden hose after Howie's played Let's Pretend This Long Green Thing's a Snake with It may not recall the exact circumstances of Bunnicula's coming to live with us. One night a couple of years ago, the Monroes went to the movies and on one of the seats discovered a dirt-filled shoebox holding a tiny white and black bunny. A note in a foreign language read, "Take good care of my baby." Because the movie Dracula was playing there that night, Mrs. Monroe had the bright idea of combining Bunny and Dracula to come up with the rabbit's name, Bunnicula. This was after she had the anything but bright ideas of naming him Fluffy or Bun Bun. She means well, Mrs. Monroe, but sometimes her taste is decidedly Brady Bunch. Now, I was not convinced, as Chester clearly was, that Bunnicula's mother, if she in fact had been the one to leave him at the movie theater in the first place, would still be hanging around there. After all, how long can anybody take a diet of stale popcorn and gummy bears? And if she had not stayed there, what would make her want to return? Remorse? But I did find his argument compelling that Bunnicula, for whatever reason, seemed to miss his mother and had gone on his recent rampage out of excitement over Mother's Day. So perhaps it was worth trying to find her. I didn't let on that my motives were different from his. He may have been out to undo some vague grand plan he imagined was underway. He may have been determined to destroy vampire rabbits. I was intent on returning them. And I think that's supposed to be an I instead of a J. Sorry, continuing. Luckily, the rain stopped, the sun came out, and soon the sweet smell of spring blossoms and fresh earth permeated the air, not to mention certain other aromas of indefinitely greater interest to dogs. "Do you two have to stop at every hydrant?" Chester snapped at one point. "We're investigating," I explained. Sorry. "Yeah," said Howie. "Maybe we'll pick up Bunnicula's mother's scent." "Unless she's a volunteer fire rabbit, I don't think that's too likely," Chester retorted. "Now come on." "How do you know where the movie theater is?" I called out. "I don't," Chester shot back. I would have protested, but what difference would it have made? Chester never allows a minor detail like not knowing where he's going to get in his way. Besides, it really was shaping up to be a beautiful day, and to my surprise, I was glad to be out in it. I didn't even mind that the streets we were trotting along no longer seemed familiar. After some time, we came to a street that was lined with stores. A new scent caught the attention of my nostrils. I lifted them to the air and sniffed. "Pizza!" I cried. "Lunchtime!" "No anchovies on mine," said Howie. I doubted he knew what anchovies were. He just said it, I think, because Pete always says it when the Monroes order pizza. "Will you two get your mind off your stomachs for once?" Chester said impatiently. "Look at those two dogs over there. They seem perfectly content just to be lying in the sun. Why can't the two of you—" Chester was cut off by Howie's yipping. "It's Bob and Linda!" I looked closely. A caramel-colored Cocker Spaniel in a Mets cap, a West Highland White Terrier with a lavender bandana knotted jauntily around her neck. The bandana may have been different, but otherwise, the two looked exactly the same as when we'd last seen them. "It is them!" I exclaimed. "Chester, it's Bob and Linda from Chateau Bow Wow." I don't know whether it was Bob and Linda in particular, or the memory of the boarding kennel where we'd met them, but Chester muttered, "Oh no," and rolled his eyes. If Pete was an Olympic eye roller, Chester could have been his coach. Howie ran on ahead of us. "Well, look who it is," I heard Bob saying. "Linda, it's little Howie from that dreadful place the kids left us last summer." The kids was what Bob and Linda called their owners. Linda raised herself to her haunches. "Well, so it is," she remarked, looking in my direction. She called out, "Yoo-hoo! Harold, is that you?" "And Chester," I called back. Chester was muttering under his breath as we approached. "Well, for heaven's sake," Linda went on, "whatever brings you to Upper Centerville? This is just too quaint." I noticed that the two dogs were tied to a parking meter in front of a coffee place called Espresso Yourself. Cute name. Bob's leash was bright green with the word polo printed repeatedly in purple letters along its length. Linda's was lavender, perfectly matching her bandana, with Halston repeated on it in black. Next to them was a ceramic trough with Pour les Chines written on the side. It was filled with water with slices of lemon floating in it. I later learned that Pour les Chines means for the dogs. So this was Upper Centerville. Well, I said, trying to come up with an answer to Linda's question that would not immediately qualify us for the loony bin. We're out for a stroll, actually. We're looking for the movie theater, Chester said. What a relief. He wasn't going to say, because... Oh, no. We're looking for a vampire rabbit. Have you seen one? Not lately, said Bob. He looked over his shoulder as if to say, I wonder what's keeping the kids. We don't get many vampire rabbits in Upper Centerville, Linda said, regarding Chester with a mixture of sympathy and distaste. What exactly would we be looking for? Black and white, said Chester. Red eyes, fangs, strange eating habits. They thought for a moment. We do know a Dalmatian who's awfully fond of tofuti, Linda offered. But then, who isn't, said Bob. Linda nodded her head as Chester began muttering to himself again. I wish the kids would get out here with our cappuccino, Bob said. Then, say, here's a coincidence. We ran into 2 other guests, from Chateau Bow Wow just the other day. Linda wrinkled her nose. Those 2 cats, she said. No offense to you, Chester. None taken, said Chester. I assume you're referring to felony and misdemeanor. Indeed, said Bob. Seems they were up to their old tricks. The kids were walking us in downtown Centerville. They hadn't taken us there in years, but now it's so out, it's in again, if you know what I mean. I didn't have a clue. Linda picked up the story. We had just passed the movie theater when we spotted these 2 cats scurrying out from behind a garbage pail in the next alley. I referred to them as riffraff, a little loudly, I'm afraid, and one of them said, Hey, you remember us? And that's when I knew it had to be felony and misdemeanor, said Bob. They seemed genuinely pleased to see us. They asked where we lived. We told them we'd just moved and couldn't remember the address, Linda said. After all, they are cat burglars. They were on their way to a so-called caper even as we spoke. Shameful. Bob shook his head sadly. They have too much time on their hands. That's their problem. They need a hobby. Anyway, they told us they lived down there. In the alley? Chester asked. No, said Linda. Somewhere nearby. They just use the alley as their office. Wow, said Howie. Do they have a fax machine? Bob smiled indulgently at Howie. I don't think so, he said. Maybe you'll see them when you go to the movie theater. There's something to live for, said Chester. As he was gaining directions to downtown Centerville, Linda suddenly remembered something. Last night, she said, we saw a black and white animal rummaging about in the garbage behind that new vegetarian restaurant. Just caught a glimpse of it, really. Maybe it was the rabbit you're looking for. Chester's ears perked up. Vegetarian, did you say? Yes. It's right down the street, here between Maison de Wallpaper and Amour de Hair. You can't miss it. In the French Quarter, eh? Said Chester. Well, thanks for the tip. We'll check it out before we head downtown to the theater. Bidding Bob and Linda goodbye, we headed off down the street. If it was Bunnicula's mother, said Howie, as Maison de Wallpaper came into view, wouldn't she be asleep now? Making it all the easier for us to find her, said Chester, a satisfied smile creeping across his face. Who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky and find more than one sleeping vampire. There, that must be it. Viciously veggie, the sign on the restaurant read, Power food for the power hungry. I was learning a lot about the people who lived in Upper Centerville. A narrow passageway ran between the 2 buildings. We could make out a glimpse of garbage cans and what looked like a dumpster at the far end. Chester went into a skulking position. Oh, do we have to? I whined. You know I hate to skulk. You're a hunter, Chester snapped. Now let's go. Chester began to slink along the building's edge, his body tight and as focused as a missile homing in on its target. I would have taken him a little more seriously had I not seen him assume the same position stalking a butterfly the week before. Howie was directly behind Chester, imitating his every move. For sheer entertainment value, there's nothing quite like watching a dachshund trying to slink like a cat. But who am I to judge? After all, was I not soon third in line? If I wasn't exactly skulking, I was doing some sort of vague interpretation of your basic hunting stance. Not that I've ever been a hunting dog, mind you, regardless of what Chester may think about my canine instincts. The Monroes don't believe in hunting, for one thing. And as for me, just the thought of carrying something dead and uncooked between my teeth. As we got closer to the back of the buildings, Chester slowed to a near halt. I see something, he hissed. Look there, between those two garbage cans. I didn't see a thing until the sun bounced off something shiny. Was it metal? No, it glistened and moved as if it was alive. I'm going to go for a closer look, said Chester. Cover me. Okay, Howie said. Do we have a blanket, Uncle Harold? I don't think that's what Chester has in mind. Oh. Chester was moving as cats do when they're closing in on their prey, which is to say, I could have napped between steps. When he got close, however, his demeanor and his tempo did an abrupt change. Run! He shouted as he turned and sped past us back up the alleyway. What is it? I cried out. Well, may you ask why I cried out instead of following Chester's, for once, wise advice? Suffice it to say that those 3 little words kept me in the wrong place for 3 little seconds too long, and then it was all over Howie and all over me. We hightailed it out of there as fast as we could, but the damage was done. My eyes were stinging, my throat was burning, my nostrils were begging for mercy. Chester, I shouted, I'm going to get you for this! But Chester couldn't hear me. He was far off in the distance, heading for home. So was Howie, and so was I, and so was the stench of a skunk. Oh, poor Harold and Howie. Skunk smells awful. Oh, gosh. Join me for the next chapter. We'll see what happens next.